Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. I'm your host, Teri Barr, and so happy to have you here listening again today. A good question. And many of you may be thinking about spring vacation, spring break, but have you heard of the idea of purchasing by using this idea, buy now, pay later? And then the question comes in, can you actually buy now, pay later to fund you're traveling? Well, we have someone here with us today who's going to break it all down, the good and the bad about this buy now, pay later trend. Sally French is a travel expert with NerdWallet. Hi, Sally. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Terry.
Okay, so this buy now, pay later, this just seems so odd to me for traveling, but what is it? And how does this actually work for travel
Yes.
costs?
Yeah, you're right, Terry, to say that it's odd for traveling, because buy now, pay later has been a huge phenomenon that's been really, really popular in the last few years, especially in the beauty industries and the
Yeah.
fashion industries. So this is a site type of alternative credit where basically you buy the item now, and then just as it sounds, you pay for it in smaller increments over time. Terms vary by the company you use, but typically you'll pay for it in four installments. So if you purchase, say, a dress that's $100, you can walk away from the store now with it in your hands. You'll pay probably 25 now, and then maybe every month for the next 3 months, you will pay $25, which is still the same $100 dress, paid for into smaller payments. So we see this commonly with credit cards. People, buy something with a credit card, they have it
Yeah.
now, and they pay off slowly over time. So in a lot of ways, this is similar, but there are also a lot of differences that we'll talk about later. Also,
Okay.
similarly, a lot of people ask about, isn't this sort of like layaway? It's actually almost
Yeah.
the opposite of layaway. With layaway, you say, I want this expensive diamond necklace down the road, so I'm going to pay some money now, pay some money a little bit later, pay some money a little bit later until I've paid enough money. Then I finally get to walk away with that, necklace that I reserved. That's like a really interesting savings method
Hmm.
because people who have trouble saving, they're putting money down and they're giving it to, the jewelry store to hold so they can eventually get this thing that they really want. This is
Right.
the opposite. You get the thing you want now, and then after you've used it or after you've purchased it, then you have to pay for it. So
Ugh.
something like a dress, you can use that dress for many, many years to be paying off the trip long after you've taken the trip. That said, travel is the fastest growing segment in the buy now, pay later marketplace. In 2019, just $10 million was spent collectively on the travel industry. So 10 million in 2019. By 2021, $800 million was spent
Oh,
on buy now, pay later within the travel industry. That's a
wow.
7,900% increase, which is that's a pretty big increase.
That is huge, Sally. Okay, so this is very, very popular. Yeah, you mentioned those numbers, and those just kind of hit you because you're thinking about, oh, the love of traveling. And now, of course, people are getting back out there. But the idea that you're booking it, enjoying it, then paying for it. Ouch. I don't know. Okay. So let's talk about the three problems when it comes to using this whole buy now, pay later idea. How about late fees? Does that impact buy now, pay later?
Yes, late fees are really common in the buy now, pay later industry. Of
Mm,
course, pretty much any form of credit is going to charge late fees.
right.
Credit card companies are also going to charge late fees if you don't pay them off on time. And so, it's, not fair to say that these are worse than credit cards, but I do think buy now, pay later sort of gets you in to pay this way when you might not
Mhm.
necessarily need to. The challenge, if you just forget to make a payment, sometimes I forget to just go to a meeting or like forget to put on my shoes that morning.
Right.
This seems, if you can afford to not use buy now, pay later, it's a good deal. The average late fee is $8. And you figure, that's $8 that I could have bought, a sandwich on vacation. I would rather not pay the late fee.
Okay, very good. The second one that is kind of a strike against buy now, pay later. I don't even get this. Tell me more about how a required auto pay can impact you if you decide to go this way for traveling.
Yeah, so this is something really interesting that sort of sets buy now, pay later apart from credit cards is that
Okay.
some, not all, but many buy now, pay later companies will require you to set your bank accounts to auto pay. And a lot of them tout this as a good thing. It does kind of guarantee that you won't get hit with that late fee that we just talked about.
Right.
It kind of guarantees that you will pay and make the payment. The challenge is it's not exactly a guarantee because what happens if you don't have money in that payment account? So forced auto pay is most likely going to come out of a checking account.
Yep.
The challenge is if your checking account has $0 or even just, the payment increment you need to make is $100 and you only have $50 in there. Then what happens is you will still get hit with that late fee. And then on top of that, many banks will charge overdraft fees. If you
Hmm.
try to make a payment that you don't have sufficient funds, you're going to get hit with an overdraft fee. Sometimes those can be well over $8. I've seen, $30 overdraft fee.
Right.
So
Right.
suddenly you forgot to make this payment. It is, auto paying out of your account, but you forgot to check to make sure you have sufficient funds. Suddenly you have the $8 late fee, the $30, overdraft fee, and suddenly this thing that you got is becoming very expensive.
Oh, that one sounds really painful. So, okay, that's a good one to know about when you're actually considering this buy now, pay later. And then the other one, number three, I find really interesting because I also saw a survey where it says something like 45% of the buy now, pay later users did it because it covered their purchase when they otherwise may not have been able to afford it. And
Yeah.
traveling fits into that, where I can see you use a credit card to pay. But how does buy now, pay later almost get you to then overspend what you probably should not overspend?
Yeah, Teri, and this really digs into, why I really struggle with encouraging people to use buy now, pay later
Hmm.
is they've got some really smart marketing and psychology people working there. And they've sort of framed buy now, pay later in a way that makes it seem like something you can afford when you really can't. So, again, let's go back to that, $100, let's say instead of a dress that we talked about earlier, jewelry, let's talk about an $100 flight. And, someone might say, I can't afford to take an $100 flight to go to Vegas for this weekend. I'm not going to go. But now we look and we see, major airlines like American Airlines and United Airlines are offering these buy now, pay later services. And
Mm.
it can often be advertised as pay $25 for your flight now. And then in small fine print, pay three more installments of $25 later. And so suddenly, I know I'm not paying 20 or $100 for a last minute flight, but
Right.
$25, yes, that's a deal. A $25 flight is a deal. And this really smart marketing psychology goes in that sort of makes you forget that it's $25 now, but ultimately you're going to have to make up that difference down the road. So paying the $75 difference, and we talked about the $8 late fee and the $30 overdraft fee. Suddenly, the $100 flight that you could have just paid for up front might end up being $138. And so it really makes it feel like you can afford something because you only have to pay $25 now when you completely forget that you still are going to have to pay off the rest. And what
Right.
I really do think is challenging about travel is it's often something that you can't return. Even change and cancellation policies are so
Ugh.
complicated. So you might not even end up taking the flight for whatever reason. Versus, a dress, you can probably return it to the store.
Hmm.
Often with travel, you just can't. And you're stuck with this thing that you have to pay off long after you've taken it, or maybe you never even took it to begin with.
Oh, I know. And it's so challenging because people really do want to travel right now. And I'm sure when you see that, ooh, $25, that looks terrific, but then you're paying for it long after you've had that great trip and then wondering, why did I do this?
Absolutely. And credit cards definitely act similarly in the
Hmm.
fact that you can have something now. And often with credit cards, you have to pay $0 now. You can have the thing now. You don't have to pay for it until maybe a month from now when that bill
Right.
is due. But credit cards typically won't have that sort of marketing language where it makes it seem like you get this thing for free or cheap, and then you just pay for it in small installments over time. I do think it is a little bit more clear that you are, with credit cards, paying $100 for the flight. Whether you pay it off all in 1 month is sort of up to you. And of
Right.
course, with a credit card, you're probably going to get hit with interest charges if you don't pay it all off within that month or before that next billing statement. But the way that these programs like Afterpay or Affirm that offer buy now pay later
Yeah.
services really make you think that the item is often a quarter of the cost of what it is. I'll
Oh,
see people say, wow, I only had to pay $25 for this dress, and I realize later that I'm paying $25 again and again and again.
yes.
That's something that a lot of people just don't realize.
Yeah. It's almost like that gotcha moment that many people talk about sometimes. Okay.
Totally.
So, what do you think, Sally? When it comes to the bottom line with buy now, pay later, what do you suggest?
Yeah, well, I do want to be fair to these companies, and they definitely have their time and their place.
Okay.
This can be an affordable alternative to credit. So, speaking, of travel specifically,
Hmm.
sometimes you have to travel. You have a sick relative that you have to go see.
Right.
And even if you don't have the money now, I would argue, a sick relative, you have to go take care of them. That's not a financial option. And so, if you don't have money to pay for the airfare upfront in cash, you might turn to a credit card, and you can book that flight now and you can pay for that flight once you have the money. And the challenge with that is it can be tough to get approved for credit cards if you
Right.
already have poor credit, if you don't have a history of credit because you're new to credit, maybe you're an immigrant and you have trouble getting approved for a credit card. Credit cards
Yeah.
aren't for everyone either. And of course, with credit cards, there's almost always going to be interest charges unless
Yeah.
you have something like a 0% APR promotional offer. The good thing about buy now, pay later is often they say you won't owe any interest if you pay off on time. And so
Hmm.
again, going back to that $100 flight, you don't have $100, but you need to take the flight because you're caring for a sick relative. You only have $25. Great. Let's book that now. And your next paycheck, you'll have an extra 25, and your next, you'll have an extra 25. It can actually be cheaper than using a credit card if you know you'll pay off on time. Whereas that credit card is going to charge you with interest rates, which means that $100 flight is going to cost more than that.
Right.
And so for that reason, I think buy now, pay later can be really, really useful for people who need the money, who can't otherwise get approved for a credit card or just
Hmm.
don't want to pay those interest charges. And there are people who can really act responsibly with it. I talked to one person who was going through a breakup with their partner, and they were in the midst of dividing finances. And he just said it was too messy to book this new trip while he was still in the midst of splitting ongoing bank accounts. And
Yeah.
he also had a separate side business, and he wanted to just sort of free up some cash flow. He said, I absolutely know I'm going to pay off this trip, but I just want to be able to have some cash flow given this messiness of his breakup and his
Yeah.
business. And so, there are definitely ways that people can use buy now, pay later to their benefit. It's just really important that you know what you're in for, that you know what those late fees are. You're going to ensure that you're not going to overdraft on that forced auto pay, and that you're really clear that you're not falling for those marketing tactics. It's not some 75% off trip. You are still paying the full price some way, somehow, just not now. But if you take the trip now, you're going to have to pay for it down the road. And sometimes that's more painful.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So options are good. Read the bottom line on all of it, though. And then I guess decide really what is best for you. I want to say it's one of those listen to your head um, for the smartness in dealing with the money, not your heart that's saying, I got to take this trip right now. But hopefully it works out whatever you decide to do.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, Sally French, always terrific to talk to you. And especially when it comes to talking about traveling. I love it so much. Thank you, Sally.
I hope you have some good travel plans this year.
I hope so too. And you've helped us kind of worm our way through this whole idea of buy now, pay later, and figure out what really does work for every individual. Again, everybody's Sally French with NerdWallet, and I'm Teri Barr with the PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. Have a great day, and we'll talk with you again next week.